Yes, let's start. So the very straightforward question now, after having listened to all this information, is, so we have both learned a lot about the Swedish planning system, and we have learned a lot about the Ukrainian planning system, and also the challenges that you face in the situation of war and recovery, which is of course at a scale that is unimaginable. It's like rebuilding all of Sweden in an instant. As Oleksandr just stated, that this has to be made fast, because there will be numerous other challenges coming up all the time. So we cannot wait and think that there will be a moment of silence where we can work closely on this. But we have to have good strategies, as Salar just stated, to do this in the most efficient and transparent way. So now the question for the panel here is the Swedish experience that we have shared with you today. How do you think that Ukraine can benefit from this experience, and what could be the focus, the strategic focus for our support and our aid to Ukraine in the coming years? So I think I start with this question for our new guest, Fulco Treffers in Rosquit, who has been working with this issue, general issue, for some, I don't know how many years you have worked actually, Fulco, but you are very active in this network of Rosquit to mobilize for this big enterprise. So welcome to us here in Göteborg.
Thank you, Pehr, Mikael, for inviting me, and thank you for introducing me. I'm Fulco Treffers. I'm a Dutch urban planner and architect, and I've been working in Ukraine since 2015. I started as with a project in Mariupol, and actually a couple of days ago we finished the new strategic vision for Mariupol. We did again for the city council in exile. So it's a very important moment, week for me. Yeah, and so in the meantime, I founded Rosquit together with Oleg Drozdov, and there's a lot to say about that, but let's keep that for another moment. A huge network of Ukrainian and international urban specialists. Your question about how can Ukraine benefit from the Swedish experience? Besides everything that has been said, as far as I followed the full program, which unfortunately I could not, but I would give a very specific advice to try, as Swedish organizations, to try to dig into the Ukrainian context as good as possible. This is not easy, and you should do it in an appropriate way, not by just asking anybody to spend all their time to feed you. But it's very often I see international companies, international organizations, donor organizations trying to implement their own ideas and how their country works at that moment without any war, and try to implement that into in the Ukrainian, into the Ukrainian field. But well, many things have been said about the time, about the capacity, about the continuous shelling. But to really understand that, you have to really be there, dig into the ground of Ukrainian context. So my main advice would be to have many more, not more meetings like this, although I think it's perfectly organized, but be in Ukraine, talk to the people from the municipalities, not Oleksandr Schevchenko only, or the people from Ensau, but the people who really do the work in those 1,469 hromadas. And then you understand how difficult it is to make these connections and how difficult it is to really implement your ideas. But there are constantly possibilities. There's challenges, but there's possibilities there as well. I learned it in 8 years, and there wasn't even a war for 7 of those years. But at a certain moment, I found the way where the differences were and where the collaboration was possible. But it took really a lot of time, and I hope the Swedish have the possibility to take a speed on that.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I think we do have that. We have a very strong political support now for this effort. So yes, so let's go to our next Ukrainian partner here, the president of NSA, and what you would think about how we can collaborate in the future, and what you find interesting with the Swedish experience from your perspective.
Є? Дуже дякую за запитання. Дуже дякую за сьогоднішню подію. Вона яскрава і інформативна одночасно. Я для себе лишній раз переконався в тому, що прискорення будь-яких процесів відновлюваних в Україні точно буде швидшим, якщо ми будемо взаємодіяти. Нам цікаво те, що ми почули стосовно того, як влаштовано урбаністичне планувальне життя в Швеції, зокрема, дуже важливі і для нас питання, дуже важливо це знати, усвідомлювати. І нам дуже допомагає ситуація, коли ми можемо посилатися на досвід країн і суспільств, які нам допомагають, зокрема Швеція. Те, що я говорив в своєму виступі, поєднання формальних документів урбаністичних, які розробляються і приймаються як документ до виконання місцевою владою. Поєднанні з неформальними роботами, які сьогодні були представлені, прокоментовані, які в результаті приводять нас до віднайдення тих інструментів, які допоможуть приймати правильні рішення уже формально. Що для нас важливо? Ми переконані, що найбільш корисним для нас буде така широка тотальна допомога, сприяння на такі точкові, на різні території, на різні міста, різні місця концентрації тимчасово переміщених осіб, або місця, які являються атрактивними і дуже знаковими для України. Тобто націленість на конкретні проекти, конкретних колективів, зовсім не фокусуючись на допомозі Києву, центру, владі. Там хай вирішує уряд. Ми, фахівці, повинні працювати на горизонтальних зв'язках за дуже адресними, скажімо, такими подіями. Я одного разу заявляв шановному пану Мікаелю на онлайн-зустрічі, що для нас надзвичайно важливим є досвід такого розвинутого в демократичному відношенні суспільства, як Швеція, досвід громадського спілкування, партисифікації, залучення громадськості. Я переконаний, що це дасть максимальні результати, бо наше суспільство знаходиться одночасно в стані шоку, бо війна не є природним явищем, для людського суспільства, і одночасно в стані такої консолідації опору. А значить, це використавши і правильно націливши, досягнути максимального результату. В завершенні можу сказати, що ті напрацювання, ті технологічні рішення і застосування технологій, про які сьогодні розповідали, зокрема побудова віртуальної моделі міста, це теж дуже важливо і для нас може бути надзвичайно корисним. Я зараз своїм колективом працюю над проблемами такого міста, як Чернівці, південний захід України, і те, що нам продемонстрував колега в системі такої віртуальної моделі міста, надзвичайно корисно. Це безвідносно війни, це просто відносно побудови якісного середовища для проживання людей. Хочу подякувати за цю роботу, яку провели всі для того, щоб і організувати цей захід, і для того, щоб донести до колег, професіоналів свої знання, свої напрацювання, свій досвід. Це дуже корисно для нас і прошу, як кажуть, давайте продовжити в тому ж дусі. Дуже дякую.
Thank you, Oleksandr. We have the second Oleksandr, Schevchenko, also with us. So I'm very curious about what you think about how we can collaborate on in the next stage, as you said in your speech. You hear me, Oleksandr?
Yes, sorry, like last minute there was the interruption with the I might have missed your question. Could you please repeat?
Yes, yes. So, Oleksandr Schevchenko, you said, well, we are talking about the next stage here, and how do you think that the Swedish experience can be used to collaborate in the next stage for the planning for the rebuilding in Ukraine?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I listened to the responses of the previous two speakers. I would like to start with the point that the war has not only started last year. It has a long duration since 2014, which is an ongoing process and has a deep root in Ukrainian territories in the south and in the east. What Sweden can do, frankly speaking, I think that we have done enough of analysis of best practices and trying to compare things symmetrically during the last 1.5 years. And I think that the most awaited thing in Ukraine from Sweden would be taking the decision of the strategic vector, which is a strong position from Sweden and not only from Ukraine, because for Ukraine right now it is a certain shock, and Ukraine experiences problems in many various sectors. So I think partially I would agree with Fulco. It is important for Sweden to observe what you can see in Ukraine from the side and suggest a certain strategic vector. However, I won't say that it would be enough only to listen and to be in Ukraine. I think it is a matter of also own innovative ideas, what could be complementing. Because if you ask an average head of the municipality, he or she will list you down very basic needs which cover the planning horizon of 1 year, 2 years. However, there would be much more complex challenges in this municipality in 5 years, 10 years. And for instance, Swedish side has this mental space and this expertise to take this thinking process together with Ukrainian counterparts. So in a nutshell, I think this is my feeling, and also my dialogue with colleagues from the same sector here in Ukraine, that for instance, Denmark took their decision. They're working with Mykolaiv area, and they're trying to be kind of as much specific as possible within this context, not getting all precise and full information from Mykolaiv, but sometimes taking a lead by themselves.
Yes, well, actually, a lot of things are happening on the ground in Sweden. We learned just when planning this program that there was a high-level meeting with Melitopol municipalities that we haven't heard much about in the newsreel. I don't know if Salar knows about that, but SIDA has made an agreement with this city, which indicates that there is a certain commitment there. We also heard now that the government sort of confirms, or seems to be willing to confirm, the former government's direction towards dealing with reuse of resource flows or materials. So there are certain initiatives taking place in Sweden that also is beyond the scope of this project. So what we have tried to focus on for our part is actually strategic planning. So I now want to give the word to the national architect and to give your reflection about our initiative and what you see from the state point of view, that this can, what you think about this, so to speak. I don't know what you can say.
I think it's a very good first initiative. And then Salar here, and I know SIDA, they have other discussions going on. So we'll see where we land in that, what can be next step from Sweden. I'm not totally updated on that myself. But what I see from those 4 meetings that we have had, we can see that when we do researches in Sweden, and how can we do really good planning, and ask the municipalities what is the biggest hinder for that. They say knowledge, and what we've seen here, you see that you in Ukraine, you have a lot of knowledge, and that's kind of the first step, to have the knowledge. And we heard all the presentations today, and I'm very impressed by the Ukrainian presentations, just being able to think all those good thoughts about planning in a situation like this. I think it's remarkable. And then I'm also inspired by a thing I did yesterday that makes me think that we need to zoom out too. Yesterday I stood on the same stage as 2 researchers in climate. First, Johan Rockström, who is now the big boss of the Potsdam Institute and a climate researcher on a world level. And he talked about polycrisis, that the war, the climate change, the loss of biodiversity, we need to see those crises at the same time, and we need to see that they all are part of one another. And he's a climate researcher, but what he says is that the most important thing to work with is to see just and safety in the world, to be able to work with the climate crisis. And how do we plan cities that are just and safe? And that's the way to meet also the climate crisis. And then we had Hans-Joachim Schellnheimer, who's Nobel Prize, got the Nobel Prize for one of the founders for IPCC, IPCC, and also was the boss of the Potsdam Institute before you, Oleksandr. He said the solution to do sustainable cities and work with climate change, or the solution to work with climate change is really to change the way we plan cities and build buildings. That's the key for the climate change crisis. So we need to learn in Sweden how to do in different ways. We need to transform the way we build and we plan. So when we give you our knowledge, I think that you also need to know that we are also in learning right now and in a transition to do things differently. And I think that collaboration with other countries, with you in Ukraine, you have this situation, with other countries, can make us all better at things that we do in common. And that's really the key. Knowledge is the key to be able to do better in our different countries. And we need to learn exactly as you do. And the cities we build today maybe are not the best cities. The buildings, they should even be better. And the way we do things, we need to change them too. And maybe we can think together here and get some insights from each other. So that's really, I think this is an important thing to remember in all collaborations, that it's always both ways. We have learned a lot from you too, on those 4 events. So thank you, Swedish Architect Association, for arranging this. I think there's a mutual learning and a new level of understanding, and that's the first step.
Yes, thanks so for these grateful words and this zooming out a bit to get us back on track in the major things that we actually need to attend to in this situation. Personally, I also, of course, this has been an enormous learning process to undertake this project to look at future images for Ukraine on a national perspective. So it's a kind of planning that we normally wouldn't do. And on top of that, actually, in the situation of a war going on, which is sort of not part of normal planning practice and shouldn't be actually, but we should plan for war atrocities in actually according to the Swedish law also, but we usually don't think too much about that. And now we have to think about it, and as Oleksandr showed us in Chernihiv, very particularly how to protect people actually now, here, not in the future. But I was thinking about this perception of architecture that emerges from this project. And I remember in the second seminar where Helena Olinik, who has been also our very good partner in organizing this from NSO, she got the question, what has this changed? What is the transformation that this result in for an architect? Well, it's like, well, everything that I thought was important is not important anymore. So I'm not sure if she's right, actually, but it was the same I felt today with Maxim Holovko's presentation, that we need to focus on things that are really effective and that are not too complicated. So we need to think about the scale and the efficiency of things, which is actually a long-standing tradition in architecture. But in Sweden, we are more used to this very fine insertion projects in specific context and considering a lot of complexity. Like, I mean, amazing here in Gothenburg that we see now, you realize this big railway project that you have been, I think, talking about now for 20 years or something at least. And I have been following this throughout my career in my capacity as policy advisor at the Association of Architects. And I remember when we put it into the proposal for the architecture policy of Sweden, that they should promote this kind of insertions of smart infrastructure within a city, actually considering at the time 2007 that Göteborg was promoting this idea of having this railway system in underground to get a better traffic and mobility system for the city for the future. So, I mean, this is a profession where you have to think 30 years ahead at least. And it's so interesting to become more experienced in this profession that you see that things actually can change that people thought were impossible. So we have to always have this double perspective of the now and the present. But now in Ukraine, I see very clearly that we need to upgrade our ideas of the efficient and the very smart, quick and large solutions that are still in high quality for the people, and to consider the children's perspective, the people with different disabledness, and also the non-humans, the biological life that is always at risk now with this very technological civilization that we actually manage now as architects. So together with many other engineers and experts that we need to do this, and that Ukraine also is a great opportunity to implement the very best new technologies that we don't even have the resources in Sweden to work with. You actually now have a motivation to implement a lot of smart things. So I hope we can help Ukraine to do smart things in this situation. And I'm looking forward to, from the association's part, to work with NSO and Oleksandr and your team in the next stage that we had approved from the European Union now, Creative Europe funding for a knowledge exchange program for the coming 3 years. So we will come back. This is not the last seminar. So we will have a next seminar in Kyiv in October, and we will also have another seminar in Lviv in September. So there will be a lot of activities coming, actually. So I'm looking forward to see you for the coming years, several times. And we will continue to feed in our networks and our expertise in a, I hope, a good way. So I now wish to have a last word from all of you. That what would you think would be the best thing that could happen during the coming year? So I go back to Fulco Treffers. Apart from, of course, we all hope the war will end and there will be a peace treaty that can last for many generations. But apart from that, in terms of resources to Ukraine to make a good recovery from the war, what would be on your top priority list? So first, Fulco.
Oh, you should have prepared this, Pehr, Mikael, but let's try. Top priority would be to revive economy and revive capacity of Ukrainian civilians to be in Ukraine safe and with a perspective. The worst thing for the recovery of Ukraine that could happen is to experience another brain drain that has happened during the 90s, in my opinion. Next to the war, I don't even want to mention that, the damages. To rebuild really fast, but as practical, but beautiful and sustainable, etc. as possible. But then it only starts. So the people expect, many people will expect, as we learned from our researchers in the post-conflict, as we learned from our post-war researchers, many people expect that after the war, finally there will be money, finally it will be peaceful, and finally it will be easy again. But then another huge task begins again. And that tasks will push away people again. Ukrainians will make decisions on whether they want to stay in Ukraine or leave or don't come back at all. And I think knowing that as an international community, that it's for Ukrainians extremely hard to make those kind of lifelong decisions, career-changing, character-changing decisions, even maybe sometimes. We have to support that. So we have as colleagues and as donors and as we have to be really, really grateful and also really generous to support that in any possible way. In the mindset and the speed and the necessity that the Ukrainians have. So prevent the brain drain, develop economy, and then support with money and with knowledge the Ukrainian rebuilding. Well, it's a top 3 priority there in no particular order. They are so much interlinked.
Much for that. So next, I think for Oleksandr Chizhevsky, what is your top priority, top 3 then?
На жаль, хочу сказати таку політичну сентенцію. Наша нинішня історія продемонструвала, що наявність у світа ядерної зброї не є запорукою проти воєн. На жаль, наша сучасна історія продемонструвала, що наявність ядерної зброї не є запобіжником проти воєн. Я думаю, що це було помилкою всього людства і всіх інтелектуальних людей на землі, які вважали, що війна настільки може бути руйнівною, вбивчою, що ніхто до неї застосовувати в таких масштабах не буде. Через те, слухаючи плани, які нам озвучив Pehr Мikael, і розуміючи, що ми є учасниками цих планів, відразу хочеться сказати просто, давайте напишемо листа в Генеральний штаб Збройних сил України, хай вони забезпечать нам можливість проведення цих планів. Самому можу сказати, що це так близько до жарту, хоча дуже бажано. Ми дуже хочемо, щоб у нас в Україні війна завершилась такою перемогою і перемогою всього людства, щоб став такий мир, який точно засвідчив, що війни не буде завтра. В такому випадку багато питань можна буде розв'язати, зокрема, із тих, побажань, які говорив мій голландський колега. Громадяни України, особливо молодь, молоді сім'ї, повинні бути впевнені, що війна завершилась і мир надовго. Перше, що я хочу побажати нашій країні, і те, що є таким найбільш важливим і бажаним. А наступне буде таке. В нашому суспільстві дуже загострене відчуття і потреба в справедливості. І влаштувати справедливе суспільство через прозору і чесну владу на всіх її етапах нам абсолютно точно може допомогти тільки міжнародна спільнота. Українці дуже довго були бездержавницькою нацією. У нас малий досвід побудови держави. І ми, як суспільство, дуже легко піддаємося на такі популяційні маніпуляції. Ми віримо в швидке рішення проблем. Ми віримо, що є прості відповіді на складні питання, і це є наша біда, і результатом цієї біди є війна. Саме в цьому нам можуть допомогти міжнародна спільнота і, зокрема, європейські народи. Ну і третє. Справа в тому, що навряд чи можна серйозно говорити про відбудову України і її економіки, розуміючи, що ми будемо відбудовувати ту економіку, яку ми мали. Я не скажу ні для кого, мені здається, таку дуже велику новину, але наш український Донбас – це один із останніх на земній кулі прикладів ржавих поясів або наслідків індустріалізації кінця 19 століття. Подібна проблема вирішувалась після Другої світової війни в Рурі в Німеччині, в 80-ті роки в Уельсі в Великобританії, в Штатах Детройт, Пітсбург, ця полоса. Тобто це нічого нового. Там не можна говорити про відбудову, там можна говорити про формування нової економіки, а відповідно нової України. Саме через те я мрію, що відбудова України хай не буде швидкою, але вона повинна бути ефективною, вона повинна бути на абсолютно нових сучасних засадах і формувати ту економіку, яка буде доповнювати і гармонійно співпрацювати з іншими економіками Європи та світу. Дякую, вибачте, що довго.
We will come back to this in the workshop tomorrow, but I also want to give Oleksandr a chance to comment on this last question and also the last word to Helena.
Thank you, Pehr, Mikael. I won't give you a top 3. I would rather be more critical to the question which you have sounded. And I would suggest everybody not to wait that the war will be over in a year, because this way of thinking easily creates an illusion that the war will be over soon, and then we will be capable and able to do our dream projects and dream planning. However, it is important to understand that the war can be over in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years, and not to be very optimistic about it would end tomorrow, because then it creates a lot of regret and creates inertia backwards, then, which is really harder to address. So while we are at our historical maximum of the national unity, 97, 98% are gathered around the same idea. Now answering your question, what would be the best thing that would happen during the next year is that during the war, we will be as precise, as concrete, as practical as possible in developing assumptions, scenarios of how Ukraine could be recovered on the basis of municipalities, on the basis of oblasts, on the basis of all country, because as mentioned before, the number of challenges and variables is very high, and they will remain also even after the victory. So when the victory will come one day after the happiness, then there will come the time of real work, and then Ukraine, which has proved also historically the unity would not be that strong. So this time of upcoming year is very precious and is very important to start doing real steps and trying to back it with real money, even if it's not perfect. It is very dangerous to wait until the war will be over and then start building the economy, building the society, building the safety. We have to start doing it now and plan as well.
Thank you very much, Oleksandr, for these forceful words and really encouraging us to start doing things now. So the last word to you, Helena.
I'm happy that you're saying that it's not over yet, Mikael. My first word is that I really wish the Swedish government, in a short-term perspective, will make decisions so we can work even more forceful in the aid to Ukraine. And that's a short perspective, and that's a top-down perspective, of course. But then in the long term, that we can somehow, in dialogue with you, support you to build back better from inside with your own knowledge and with your own engagement, because that's how you build democracy, and that's how you really build a long-term sustainable society. So I hope when we are at 21, 23, that we can look back and see that this time was a turning point. This time was a turning point where Ukraine changed.
It's a great vision indeed. Thank you very much for these comments to help us to start reflecting on all the information today. Tomorrow, some of us will continue this work to formulate this, what we call strategic insights. And then we will summarize this in a report that will be published in the early autumn around October. And it will be then presented to the Ukraine government together with NSO and also to the Swedish government in some format. So thank you for attending today and inspiring us in this work.